I am Jason Abraham, the Shadow Teacher 33. And today I'm going to do a little episode on love. And what the fuck do I know about love? I'm a single man right now, out of a long relationship, but what the hell? I'm going to talk about it and share my perspective. Anyway, see, a friend of mine reached out to me in frustration and disappointment, as she does much of the time, as she likes to date the bad boys. She likes to date men who like to keep their options open, who want to do what they want with who they want. And she is looking for someone who is going to be fully and 100% devoted to her. And I've been reading a couple of books. One is this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And one of the principles in Atomic Habits is that humanity, we have this desire to thrive and this desire for higher status. And what we'll do is we will emulate the behaviors of an individual who's perceived as high status. And I got to thinking about my time growing up in the 1980s, a decade of decadence, a time when bands like Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue and Poison dominated the Billboard charts, dominated the music world and the world of MTV. These were the bad boys of rock and roll. One of my favorite albums as a kid, like a pivotal album, a pivotal time and identity for me, was when I heard Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses' debut album. This album, this lifestyle of danger, of fast drugs, fast women, fast living. And it's at a perspective of the sense of arrested development. These rock stars essentially were boys who never grew up, but yet they're celebrated as kings and gods. And this is the status that was projected to young men of my generation. And another book I'm reading right now is this book, Appetite for Dysfunction. And it's by Vicki Hamilton, who was a legendary manager in the Hollywood scene in the 1980s. She managed a lot of these bands I just spoke of. Motley Crue, Poison, Guns N' Roses. She was managing them early in their careers. And I'm not done with the book yet, but it's somewhat of a sad story. It's a story of a woman who gave her heart and soul because she believed in these young, talented rockers and was essentially a muse for them, who promoted them, who took them to places that they wouldn't have gone on their own, but ultimately was discarded by them as they moved on to bigger and better things in their careers. And to be fair, this is what happens much of the time. A lot of times someone will manage an artist on a local level, but when they get signed to a big label, they need someone who can take them to a bigger market. And a lot of times that just happens. But this is about a woman who had a special instinct for talent and a special eye for it, and just gave her full heart to these artists that she believed in. Now, she wasn't romantically involved in them. As I mentioned, this is about love, but the dynamic is similar to my friend I referred to earlier, someone who feels very much used by men right now. And again, the time of Vicky Hamilton, these young bands, they were supported by women a lot of times. A lot of times they lived with strippers, they lived with their girlfriends, and the women supported them because they believed they were going to be these big rock stars. And then a lot of times they were, and then they discarded their women after they were, after they became famous, after they got into this idol-like status. And I idolized these rock stars and this type of lifestyle when I was younger. When I was playing in a band, I wanted to live just like Guns N' Roses. You know, I moved to a big city with my band. We like lived in a rehearsal space. I actually had a female manager who was my girlfriend, and I cheated on her. I did a lot of the same kind of stuff that these immature young men did, and eventually it all ended in disaster. But at some point, my perspective grew, and I looked at the perspective of these rockers as being very immature and boyish. You know, it's a strange thing. It's like creativity needs freedom. It needs this wild freedom to do its thing. But at the same time, as I've grown as a human being, I see that we're responsible for what we create. And if we're just using people and discarding them because we're bored with them, then this is a very immature, unconscious way to live. And yet many people engage in this at large. And as a man, I now see great value of honoring your word, being upfront from where you're coming from. And, you know, it's okay. You know, not everyone's meant to be in a committed relationship, but being upfront with your intentions, being upfront with what you're about, and not leading somebody on because you know that you're going to get what you want out of them, but you have no intention of giving them what they need, what they really want from you. And this is an eternal dilemma, I think, because I think heterosexual men tend to value somewhat of freedom, afraid of commitment. And I see value again also in life partners, like from a man's perspective, having a partner who honors and respects me and compliments me, but there's an exchange there. It doesn't go, I just do whatever the fuck I want and they support me. There's got to be some kind of equal exchange and interdependency of value, if you will. But yet this perspective is not what we see from the celebrities of our world. And now we're kind of getting a new type of status. We're seeing weak men, men who are weak and dependent on their women and are take a backseat to a woman altogether. It's kind of the opposite of the users and abusers of the 80s, but this is also equally toxic because when a man is thriving, a man needs to stand in his strength and his sovereignty and needs to have his own path, his mission that is separate from a woman. And now again, like we see these men who are celebrated just for being the butlers, if you will, of their girlfriends, and that's not a good thing. So what I've found is when people are in their natural energies, like when a man is in his natural masculine energy and a woman can be in her feminine energy, and there's a sense of trust that goes both ways. There's a sense of surrender. A man can be strong, can use that aggressive drive in his mission and feel loved and supported by a woman, and the woman can be feel somewhat protected by the man, feel that he's going to be there for her and be supportive for her emotional needs, then there's a good harmony to this. And I know this is a very traditional, old school view of relationships, but I think there's something to it. Because, again, this is not the world I'm living in right now. I'm someone who's failed. I'm someone who's come from these dysfunctional relationships of unbalanced power and codependency that I learned from Hollywood. I learned from the celebrity culture. And I can say it's wrong. And people who I know who are in healthy, functional relationships, who've been in committed relationships, who have learned the multiple faces of love, not just the eros. The eros is the passionate love that most people focus on, but those that have learned the other faces of love that have to be there to endure a long-term committed relationship, they have this interdependent quality. They have this quality where the man and the woman, are able to honor one another and their needs and find ways to keep that respect and honor for each other through the challenges of life and through the challenges that show up when the novelty wears off, as opposed to simply discarding one another. So anyway, I'm going to end this transmission, and what I want to close with again is we have to take a deep look at the behavior that's been modeled to us, what we believe is healthy masculinity, healthy love from masculinity and femininity, and this dynamic of love and relationship that is ever so complicated and so confusing. But when we're grounded, we get the real thing within ourselves and are willing to share that, and we have that person who we trust and we build that trust with, then there is true sacred union there. And when the two come together, then the third is present, and then the love expands to something greater. With that being said, I'm going to end this transmission. Be strong, be well, and I will see you on the other side.